through digitization, innovation, startups, there's a lot of R&D now being done by small to mid-sized companies who then sell to or contract with the bigger companies. So it's my pleasure to welcome to the stage a couple of people who have distinguished careers in innovation in mining. Don Duval of Norcat and Leandro Rossi of the Mining Hub in Brazil. So welcome, guys.
Nice to formally meet you.
Nice to see you. Nice to see you. Have a seat.
Where would you like us in these two?
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Good. Can we compare socks? My kids are always concerned about what socks I'm going to show on the stage. Those are nice.
I have my Laurentian University socks.
Oh, excellent.
Based in Sudbury. There we go.
Excellent. So as we think about innovation, what are the biggest things you've seen in your careers that you wouldn't have predicted at the beginning of your career? Things that have really been able to make a significant impact on all aspects of mining. Leandro, let's start with you.
Oh. I think, Don, you can start.
Okay.
Don, you want to take that? Okay.
Yeah. Well, you know what, let me build on a point that you made in your opening presentation, which I thought was great, by the way, and a lot of really meaningful insight. You know, one of the most fascinating observations that I've seen in the mining industry, and I'll extrapolate it back beyond my career, maybe 20, 30 years ago, and you touched upon it, is that historically, a lot of these big mining operators built their intellectual property. They would have a team of, engineers, scientists locked away, charged with the mandate of build new intellectual property to make us more competitive, drive better shareholder value, drive productivity, drive better safety. And what's evolved is it's now migrated to an outsourced innovation model. And over the last 20, 30 years, the ongoing divestiture of in-house R&D within large mining operators has given rise to, because problems still need to be solved, an ever-growing, vibrant, what I call build side of the equation, where these problems are now being solved by a burgeoning startup tech ecosystem. So this transition to an outsourced innovation model by a large industry, and it's following the path of other incumbent industries where this has happened, has created a vibrant startup tech ecosystem that is creating meaningful solutions that will solve problems in the mining industry. So at a macro level, being a witness to this transition now, where you're starting to see an unbelievable amount of startups, but fast on its heels, now that there's a strong demand side to the equation, a strong buy side. For a mining operator to win, they have to buy it because they no longer build it. Now you're starting to see sources of equity capital, be it venture, angel, even junior private equity, heavily investing in tech companies that primarily sell into mining. 10 years ago, I would challenge anyone to find me a meaningful VC that primarily invested in tech that sells into mining. Now, because of the demand side of the equation that they have to buy, you're seeing this massive transformation heavily rooted in emerging startup tech companies. Again, and small to medium and large incumbents. So the most fascinating observation I have to your point right now is this whole paradigm shift that mining operators have to buy. And I can comment more on the sophistication of that model and adoption challenges. But that's the observation that I would share.
Leandro?
Yeah, good. That's what I mentioned, that you start with you. But one of the important things through this last 20, 25 years as a former executive in giant mining companies, they focus on concentrated, dedicated from the door to the operational sites internally. Focus on operational excellence, focus on performance, focus on production side. And after the one of the special period of 2008, 2009, when the market migrated to index, the companies try to pay attention outside the borders. And this is one of the important issues that, and it changed a lot, several ways to doing business, and more than it, to develop the production, to optimizations, and several other things. And another important point And how can you change performance to progress, performance to development? And this is one of the issues that you mentioned about your kids, and I think everybody that or have kids and work in mine or industrial sector, we have this, I'm saying dilemma, but it's not a dilemma, it's a matter of how we create a good storytelling in order to explain our sector to the society. And because we used to be traditional and conservative sectors that the big companies don't tell to the society. They are only dedicated to manage the content, to manage the information. And nowadays, they are open-minded, they are in an open way in order to reduce the distance between internally and outside the community. So I think these three movements during my last 20 years, it's one of the things that it's very important that and changed in the mining sector.
So the concept of a startup is familiar to everyone in that demographic, 15 to 30. Almost everyone in that demographic that I meet who wants to go into some aspect of technology thinks about a startup. And they think about a startup because it would be a small group of people where your idea would matter. You'd be able to have a front seat at the table rather than sort of feeling like you're sort of put in the back of the room. If you think about companies that are innovating in technology space, are there characteristics of startups that make them successful relative to startups that are not successful?
Now I can start. I think you're right. This label of startup or not startup, it's important issues that mainly in the mining sector, there is a big sector when big companies doing business with big companies only. But we have not, we're focused, concentrated to dedicate in startups, but we have to pay attention to the other side of the table at the mining company. They sometimes when they buy or they're looking for alternatives or solutions, or they prefer not to early adopter. They prefer to pay a little bit more, but develop the companies, develop the positives, and reduce the risks. So this is one of the points when you're looking for the the mining side that you have to take into consideration. And the startups, if it's a profile of a startup or not, depends on the characteristics that they have, the risks that they would like to get, the time to marketing. And this is some characteristics that big companies, when you're looking for the traditional governance, that's why they made the movements like as a spin-off in order to avoid the traditional governance, because they fight against good ideas and how to implement. So you were right, it's not necessary to be only startup, but to have the feelings and to have the spirit of the startups in the big companies.
Yeah, startups are crazy. It's chaotic and inefficient, but you need to celebrate that. You know, if you think of the appeal for a young individual, or, you know, candidly speaking, a lot of people in their second career will go down the path of an entrepreneurial startup, be it on the tech side or service side. But if you look at the traits, and I'll share with you two perspectives. One, at NORCAT, we are the only innovation center in the world that owns and operates an underground mine that primarily serves as a place to enable technology companies to develop, test, and demonstrate emerging technologies that they believe are poised to transform the industry. And concurrent to that, I also serve as a managing partner for a venture capital fund focused on the seed stage, high risk. We're usually first capital in, pre-revenue, pre-capitalized companies. And at that point, I would argue that they're not even really a company. So if I look at the attributes as to what a successful startup would have, especially one selling into the mining industry, if I wear my fund manager hat, I am looking for the A team. I will always invest in an A team and a B product at the early stage because I know the market will evolve and the inefficiencies that we celebrate as these companies learn and grow, I anticipate that their product that they've come to us with isn't going to be the one where we commercialize and or make money. So if you look at the absolute, fundamentals of the team, the culture, the willingness to learn and be mentored and coached, there are individuals that thrive in that environment. You know, when we have a mantra within our fund that you have to appreciate day one will never look like day two in a startup. And if you don't like that, go work for a bank or an insurance company and you'll be in heaven in your cubicle. And a lot of people will realize that, oh my gosh, this is not for me. I want that type of career. So when we're, you know, advocating and kind of promoting our fund to the market, seeking out, again, very early stage opportunities, we don't put a lot of pressure on, you know, the intellectual property. We want to make sure we get the right team, understanding the product market fit, the timing, differentiation, all the kind of usual suspects. But I always revert back. If there's a willingness to learn and thrive and appreciate the highly unproductive, inefficient startup, you know, stage, that is a team that I think will have the highest probability of success, especially when selling into the mining industry, where for a startup company with no brand credentials, trying to get the attention of a large mining operator, you're looking at 18 to 24 months at a minimum if you can hope to get a demonstration within their mine site facility, because they don't want to disrupt production, especially for a company that they don't even know if it's going to be alive in 2 years. So it takes a special mentality for those companies to thrive in the mining space.
So how do you assess that? How do you know the A team from the B team? Are there any common characteristics that you look for when you're evaluating startups?
Well, I think two different paths to assessment of that. One is dedicated to the technology, to develop that they are doing. And sometimes we needed to have patience because it could fail. So one of that is how can they develop the technical solutions, how can they building the idea. Okay, but the other one is the management, it's the team. How can they, I saw several examples that the technology, the idea, it's not advanced, but the team was very good. And the mining company is still working with that startup and calibrate the development in order to achieve from the point A to the point B. So I think it's the technical one. One is the solutions, of course. They are working to solve something in a problem or to offer something. Okay. The other one is the management, because they have conditions to combine and solving that.
Yeah, team dynamic. You know, in our fund, you know, we've had one insolvency and it was due to a shareholder dispute. And we missed it. You could sense consternation even when they were raising capital. And we missed it, and the company imploded and is bankrupt. Individuals had to go get day jobs. Yeah. The ones that are thriving are the teams that we bet right on. And again, very early stage, pre-revenue, pre-capitalized seed, like we're putting in $500,000, you know, on a convertible note. So it's a very friendly, patient capital. But the ones that are successful, that is there. And maybe not so much a startup, but if you look at some of the successful companies, the importance of culture and growth and dynamic. You know, there's a few Sudbury-based companies here from where I'm from. There's a company called Hardline that actually is demonstrating in the Hexagon Pavilion in the zone. Those individuals, just spending time with them, you appreciate the culture and the dynamic. The technology speaks for itself and the market share and the growth, but you root it when you spend time with them and understand that they are in this because they're motivated, they're inspired, they see a unique opportunity. You know, that is a telltale sign, especially in the mining industry.
Is innovation happening fast enough? And if not, what could be done to accelerate innovation?
Yeah. Well,
use Hexagon.
Yeah, like Hexagon. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. You know, so the first thing, like, let me answer this, and not to be provocative because I don't think it is anymore, but I have been steadfast that the mining industry does not have an innovation problem. The mining industry has a technology adoption problem. Mining industry, I think Rob Daw spoke about data. Mining industry does not have a data problem. It has a data utilization problem. So if you look at all these factors and you buy into my earlier comment that it's not an innovation problem, it's a technology adoption problem. We have seen firsthand, specifically on the exploration extraction side, and the latter being related to underground mining, we have an operating mine that serves as a place to enable tech companies, big or small, domestic or international, to develop and test and or subsequently demonstrate and showcase technologies once their IP has been finalized and they're ready to show it to the market for commercial pathways. To expedite technology adoption, we now have enough meaningful, statistically valid data that the psychology of procurement of a would-be buyer, a mine operator, to actually come underground and engage with a startup company that has a demonstrable example of an installation to demonstrate it has been de-risked, it statistically valid expedites a potential procurement and purchase order. The best thing you can do for a startup is not give them capital, it's cut them a purchase order. Our role in this equation, quite proudly, and we were talking about this earlier, we're an innovation center that owns and operates a mine. So by default, for about 2/3 of the tech companies we support, we are their first reference customer that they build a marketing narrative around to then go to a large production scale mine and say, well, of course we have a customer. And yes, it's been de-risked. Oh, and furthermore, come see it. So we have a really unique perch. And again, I think there are unbelievable technologies already out there. It's just because of the migration to the outsourced innovation model, the sophistication of mining companies to procure and assess, and how do you do ISO standard verification validation of claims that the technology does what it says it's going to do, and then the downstream deployment and integration and change management. It's still relatively new in mining. So we need to figure out ways to expedite that and streamline that. And companies like Worley, I saw them earlier, the fascinating integrator that can help companies navigate that. Companies like EY, like the rise of the integrators are going to be increasingly important because they have to buy, adopt, and deploy.
So what do the big mining companies need to do to adopt these new technologies? It's harder than simply saying yes. Right? What do you think they need to do? What is that cultural change that needs to happen?
Of course. One of that, when you see some mining sector, it's a traditional sector in terms of investments and development, R&D, since a long time ago. They are the strong development, but now when you're looking for early adoption, and this is one of the important points, and I think the big decisions and what some companies decided so fast to invest in some ideas or in some products than others. I think it's the relevance of the issue and how can they connect that innovation with the strategy. This is one of the important points. All of those here from working innovation area, sometimes there is a trend that the companies tend to split the innovation team, budget, efforts. This is the guys that will they turn around in the company three times a year, and then we have the operations, sales, and all of things in another world, looking for costs, optimizations all the time. So I think to make the key decision maker, to make their lives easier, is how can we connect innovation with the results, with the strategy. In case of not, you only be a team that, it's a good team, this is a good area, it's fascinating, but now let's talk about business. Now let's talk about innovation. So how can you concentrate and integrate that with the framework of the CEO and the decision makers in the company?
So Don, in the last few minutes that we have here, can you tell us a bit about NORCAT's Underground Center and maybe one or two examples of innovation that have come out of that center in the last few years?
Yeah, well, I shared earlier our model that we're quite proud of. Mm-hmm. You know, there aren't many innovation centers that actually own and operate an underground mine. We still run the extraction process. We have an offtake agreement with Glencore, but production is secondary. So about 45 minutes from downtown Sudbury in Northern Ontario, you could drive, ease of access. There are crews. There's a whole series of infrastructure that enable tech companies to use the operating environment much like an active laboratory. So we have a mine manager, but more akin, I should call him a lab manager, because we have to balance the tension between the regulatory oversight of being an operating mine, balanced with we're trying to support creativity and development of new, crazy, wacky ideas, so you can appreciate the tension on how do you balance that. But some companies that I'll share with, like one of them again here, Hardline, has one of their technology development centers at the underground facility. And I believe, and I'm unsure, and unfortunately I don't think they're in the room, but they have some of their infrastructure here in the zone using their chair that's a combination of teleremote systems as well as autonomous. I believe they're mucking out a live round in our underground mine. So how fascinating is that? And you talk about talent. You talk about talent. If I was to bring a elementary, not even high school, an elementary student here and say, look, this is what a career in mining can look like. You get to use this game-like kiosk with these interesting controls. You're a tech company that's serving the mining industry. You know, mining companies will adopt and deploy those types of technologies to win the productivity battle, no question. You're going to start to see mining operators thinking, we need to adopt and deploy these technologies, not just to win the productivity battle, but to win the battle for talent. And so there's a whole other body of research I can comment on that we're doing to actually be privy to some of these boardroom and executive discussions with the mining operations to say, we need to figure out how to create a job and a career that young people want, and how can we inspire them. And I really do think technology, well, not my opinion, we're hearing it at the executive level of many of these mining operations.
So you mentioned having socks on from your alma mater, Laurentian University. When you engage with students at Laurentian, what excites them?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, there is an awareness challenge, and I think you hit on it perfectly. If you look at that chart, what excites them is we physically bring them to a tour of our, this is a tactical example. We bring them to a tour of the underground center, and they see 5G infrastructure underground. They see autonomous vehicles. They see ore characterization technologies like MineSense and Ideon, and they meet the executives of these small to mid-sized companies and learn and get inspired. The optimism they have that mining is not what they believed it to be, that excites them, and how we can get them to become brand ambassadors for future generations and get the mining companies more involved to be brand ambassadors is going to further propel that excitement.
So Leandro, can you tell us a bit about the mining hub? Who are your stakeholders, your mission, your success, and what you're looking forward to over the next 5 years?
Wow, good question. Next January, we will achieve 5 years of the mining hub. When you consider a sector, an open innovation movement like this for mining, it's not so easy to sustain that for 5 years. Develop more than 15 cycles of challenges. But nowadays, when we start Mining Hub, this is a way that individual mining companies thinking about open innovation, and then, well, let's do it together. How can we make it work together? Of course, without sensitive issues in terms of interest, but how can we cooperate in order to develop, and not only sharing costs, but how can we make 1 + 1 more than 2? So that's what they are, the movement is started, and the company, and I received several sectors for benchmark, and the question they made all the time, how can you for the sectors doing for the people work together and cooperate? And I think it's we're talking about that. The competitiveness level is different a little bit, and then allows the companies to cooperate and to work together. But so Mining Hub, leading the projects, we divided the programs in 7 themes that we are operating that, and then we make all the efforts concentrated to that themes in order to speed up one side, mining companies, challenges, problems, and then looking for solutions for startups and companies that can provide those that. So when we start in doing that, several examples of startups that deploy contracts in other mining companies, testing one of that and then deploy to another one, industrial trials, JV, equity negotiation. So the mining space, it's very, very good and attractive when we put all the actors in a correct way doing that, and more than it, who prioritized the issues in the mining hub is the mining companies, sustaining by the other companies and other players like suppliers. Hexagon is one of that can contribute, and based on that, we developed our plan to sustain. Nowadays, it's more than 50 members for mining companies and big suppliers, and more than 1,400 startups that applied solutions and during our cycle. So it's a good environment for discussions and looking for the open innovation solutions down there.
So one final question for you, Leandro, and certainly comment on this, Don, if you want, but when we look at where critical mineral resources are going to be produced, they're going to be produced in Latin America, in sub-Saharan Africa. What are the challenges and opportunities, thinking here through the lens of differences among companies' cultures that exist? And how do they relate to the ability to accelerate mining in Brazil and Chile and Peru and Democratic Republic of Congo? You know, what are the challenges and opportunities you see there? Because a lot of companies where the seed capital is coming from may come from a different culture.
Well, yeah, it's minor for the futures and this to support the transition energy. You show that. Here, of course, Brazil is one of the big players on that. And I think the framework to support in that, we have a efforts combination of course, private sectors and government in order to develop policies to speed up and to unlock and to enable some values for producing down there. Just an example for you. We have in a state of Minas Gerais, one of the largest mining production in Brazil. We have in the north, they call Lithium Valley. Wow, but it's an old old owners of mining rights that when they applied for the mining rights, they don't know that there are lithium down there. So nowadays, wow, I am in a gold mine, but they don't know how to convert that in production. So this is a discussions that the government in terms of policies, in terms of laws, that they have to pay attention, because it's a game changer to attract capital, to attract investment. I just give you an example. In the past, we used to run a fertilizer project, a big fertilizer project in Argentina, and you decided to sunk in all the investments that were made in order to how can stable is that for a long term? Because mine is a long term decisions, and sometimes nowadays we decided what is the best way, what is the best alternative in order to arrive in the future. So how can we decide it nowadays in a long term position, sustaining that in our boards, investments? So this is one of the important issues. How can government and how can they define and start and develop jobs to support and to make it clear for the investments?
Don, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, like, you know, being neighbors with Michigan, you can appreciate the whole automotive and battery electric vehicle supply chain is kind of centered around Windsor, Detroit, and a bit more broadly. And, you know, both at a provincial and federal level within Canada, you know, we are heavily doubling down on manufacturing. And Volkswagen just deployed billions of dollars to build a battery facility, and the other OEMs are doing the same. And with that, there's a strong push on, we as a province more specifically, as opposed to the country more broadly, in Ontario are blessed with unbelievable mineral potential that are aligned to being defined as critical minerals. The challenge we have, and you hit the nail on the head, it's 15 to 18 years to get through the regulatory process, and capital can be patient, but sometimes not that patient. So there is a dedicated effort to try to get that going, and especially with the Biden administration's recent trip, there's this collective, you know, we as a continent need to do a bit more together for a variety of reasons. But I think that is going to be critical to figure out a way to expedite the negotiations with First Nations and the policy and the environmental and all the social elements. And then the second challenge that we have, although again blessed with a huge amount of mineral potential, is it's very isolated and very remote. And if you think of the pressure to mine sustainably, well, if you got to fly in, fly out diesel every week, you know, you have no grid access, you got to provide heating, you have, you know, in electrification in cold climates, there's a bit challenging, as you know. You know, there's still a lot of work there to kind of figure that out. But in terms of the critical minerals, if you aren't tuned into it, both the federal and subnational governments within Canada are heavily investing on trying to solve the regulatory process, to expedite it, to help the capital markets see better opportunities to invest in these, to then deploy the technologies to access these remote locations. But jury's out, but I'm cautiously optimistic.
Well, and just to add in, please, a point. Nowadays in Brazil, or in some of the countries that you mentioned, that are very strategic in terms of minerals, they have to pay attention not only to produce and send ores to abroad. They have to develop the industry locally. In Brazil, we can have a good balance of automotive industry and mining. So how can we add in value in terms of that? So this is one of the important issues that we have. But I think there is all the times we listen, Brazilians understand what I'm saying, that Brazil is the country of the future. Now it's another cycle that we have in terms of mining possibilities. So this is one important point. How can we add in value into the chain? But another important reflection about electrification, we are changing fossil automotive to electrification. But I think what we have to think about, and how can we move? How can we, the mobility? We are still moving one people in each car. So we just change for fossil to electrification and still have the same problem. So this is the mobility is one of, it's much more important to discuss and to bring some solutions more for big countries in order to only change for fossil. I'm not saying that it's not relevant, of course it is, but just moving and commuting day by day, one people by one car. So we have to think about.
I agree. So when you think about big cities, Rio, how do you electrify that entire city? No combustion engine vehicles. What does the charging infrastructure look like? Can everyone have an electric vehicle? Is that even possible? Yes, it's possible technologically, but is it practical?
Yeah. An experience that we have 2 months ago in UK, they showed to us it's not a matter of technology, it's not a matter of development, but it's a matter of how can we define the strategy and how can we enable all the implementation in terms of regulatory, in terms of everything, because it's not only electrification, like a country in Brazil. We have several other types of energies that we can use for this transaction, not only electrification, hydrogen. Hydrogen, if you pay attention to the chain of the hydrogen, it's very complex. It's not so simple. And people say, oh, we'll decarbonization programs using hydrogen. Okay, but do you know the chain, the efforts that to do that? So this is one of the points that we have to think about. And big cities are a good challenge. And in the future, the citizen can decide how can they contribute to decarbonize their city and to make it in a better place to live. So it's a challenge. But in general, if you put people centricity, we saw that yesterday. Now for this energy transition, we need to have mining centricity. It's a matter that we have to discuss and to add in value in the mining products. So we are in a very good positions to support in that.
Well, Don and Leandro, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.